Okay, so we are live. I'm just waiting for it to kick in with the Facebook feed. And then we'll go ahead, see how our audience is. Okay, all right. Now, I hear the TV on, so I'm just going to close the room. I apologize, I'm popping off camera while we're live, but hang on a second.
All right, everybody that's tuning in, hello.
Great. Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. So, okay, so let's get started. So glad to see everyone here joining us yet again. We were with you all this morning, and now we're here again for a nice evening chat. We have a really special guest, Alan Minsky, so let's get started. So, as you know, or as you may not know, my name is Margot Paez. I'm a scientist, an engineer, and an occasional journalist. And this is my co-host. He's just sitting right below Alan, Carlos Marroquin. He's an amazing grassroots organizer. And we are, like I said, we are a weekly show called Stand Up, Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for progressive movement. We simulcast on Facebook and YouTube, so please share this with your friends and please subscribe. Turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. Today we have a really special guest. His name is Alan Minsky. He's the Executive Director of Progressive Democrats of America. So Alan is he's also a friend of Carlos and mine. I've known him for over, almost a decade now. And Alan has been a lifelong activist. He's worked as a progressive journalist for the past 2 decades. In fact, that's how I met Alan, when he was the program director at KPFK here in Los Angeles. So we're really excited to have you here, Alan. And I guess I should also mention that you are one of the founders of LA Indymedia. And you also, I didn't know this, you were also a creator and producer of the Ralph Nader Radio Hour. So, wow.
Yeah, with Ralph.
You go. That's amazing.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, I'm sorry, go ahead, Carlos. What?
Yes, so we want to welcome Alan because he's been a close ally to progressives everywhere, to activists, to the activism here in Southern California. So definitely we are so happy to have you here tonight.
Honored to be with you. You guys are the greatest. And Margot is brilliant. And I got to know Margot a few years ago, and she was developing an independent journalism project. But then she's just one of the most brilliant people I know in terms of her research work. And it's nothing that I can figure out with my own brain. And then Carlos, hopefully I'll be able to get this out to people around the country. And Carlos Marroquin is just one of the most exemplary activists in the United States of America. From the community to the country to the world, he is just a legend in Southern California in the activist community. So I'm tremendously honored to be here with both of you.
We're really honored to have you. Alan, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what you've been up to, first of all. You're not at KPFK anymore. You're now the executive director of this organization. Tell us a little bit about what it is and what exactly you're doing.
Well, Progressive Democrats of America was founded only in 2004, and it was founded out of the Dennis Kucinich campaign, who was challenging the year that John Kerry won the Democratic Convention. And right at the week after the Democratic Convention in Massachusetts, which is where it was held, they started the Progressive Democrats of America. And I want to talk about that in a second, but first, just as a hook for everybody who's watching, if people don't know, and many people don't, Progressive Democrats of America was the only national organization that worked to draft Bernie Sanders to run for president. Even the People for Bernie, who we all love and we all work with, some of the founding members of that organization came out of PDA. They were originally People for Warren. Not to say that they were getting it wrong and we were getting it right. There goes my cat behind me.
I saw that.
Yeah. The Progressive Democrats of America chose to launch the Run Bernie Run campaign, and we were the only national organization in the country to do that. Bernie acknowledges this, that we were the people who pushed him to run. And of course, given the name of the organization, as you can imagine, at the time, there was a question of whether Bernie Sanders would run for president and challenge the, already anointed, assumed nominee Hillary Clinton. And given that it was such a slam dunk that Hillary was going to win the nomination this time, the question was, should he run as an independent or as a Democrat? And of course, PDA was pressuring Bernie to run, trying to draft him to run, and to run as a Democrat. And PDA proved persuasive. PDA was one of the largest progressive organizations in the country at that time. Some sort of unfortunate things happened institutionally. Most notably, of course, was the very charismatic founding executive director died in 2014. In fact, Bernie spoke at Tim Carpenter's memorial service, and that was a big moment of catapulting the prospect of Bernie running for president. And still, we're in 2014 at that point. So our politics were aligned with the politics of the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016. Of course, I was at KPFK Radio at the time, but I was involved with PDA by then. I was very involved in Occupy, even got involved in helping to organize Occupy before Occupy Wall Street started, because I had done some work with Adbusters Magazine. And Adbusters Magazine was the organization that made the call for this event to take place on September 17th, 2011 in Lower Manhattan. And I helped get the word out about this call that was made by Adbusters through the channels I had at Pacifica and WBAI and connections at Democracy Now! And stuff like that. So I was organizing for Occupy Wall Street before there was Occupy Wall Street. And so I was a pretty committed, sort of movement-oriented activist. Coming out of Occupy Wall Street, I, of course, knew a lot of progressive Democrats and PDA members because of working at KPFK. And their argument to me started to become more persuasive, which is that that especially my generation, Gen Xers and radicals in Gen X, we viewed the Democratic Party and the people who gravitated towards it to be obsequious lapdogs to corporate America. There were some very good people in there, but on balance, it wasn't the place you went if you had a really critical critique of the oppressions and imbalances of American society and the world. So, but after Occupy, this incredible groundswell of our economy, our society is unjust, unfair, right? And a really broad critique of American society that was profound and connected with millions of people. I remember the weeks where it just spread like wildfire across the country. It was spectacular. Mm-hmm. And, but that, 1 year out, 2 years out, and nothing had changed. And the argument that was being made to me by members of PDA was, get inside the only institution that can change public policy and therefore have a positive impact on people's lives. And I knew that PDA was making some impact in the California Democratic Party. I wrote an article. I went to a PDA retreat in 2014. They had launched their Run Bernie Run campaign, their national retreat. I got to know the executive director around 2013 before he died. And I then wrote an article for Truthdig that came out the day after the Democrats got crushed in the 2014 midterm elections. It said, this Democratic Party is useless. Progressives need to take it over and change the world. And it had a big picture of Bernie Sanders on it. And I laid out a broad program and broad set of policies that I thought would have great support following the tremendous support that Occupy had, and that was not being expressed by the Democratic Party that had just gotten crushed in the midterms. And I think that article is the reason I ended up ultimately being executive director 4 years later of Progressive Democrats of America. That article went somewhat viral. Of course, Bernie Sanders ran for president. I was a huge advocate for Bernie running in that article. And then as he moved for PDA, organized a very important event in Los Angeles at the Musicians Union Hall with Bernie Sanders that Bernie cites in the book Our Revolution, and also in an interview he did with Amy Goodman in January of 2017 as really being the one single event that really pushed him over the edge to say, yes, I'm going to run. And I got the place for that event and helped organize with PDA that event. Then the Bernie Sanders campaign happened, and I think it changed American politics. It changed the fabric of what's possible in electoral politics, expanded people's imagination on both in the radical left to have a relationship with electoral politics, and then also for the general public, that there are a set of concrete public policies that could be changed, and they would change the equation of American society in terms of something that would be a much fairer, much more just distribution of wealth and resources in our society. And right now, I think in America, there are three competing ideologies. There's just a reactionary very much grounded in a maintenance of the structural racisms of American society. So that's racist republicanism, Trumpism, et cetera. Then there's neoliberalism, which goes from the kind of traditional, more staid and less obnoxiously horrible wings of the Republican Party through still the dominant wing of the Democratic Party. I'll talk about that in a moment. And now there's the ascendant progressive politics that came out of the Sanders movement, is represented by the Squad. And they're transformative social democratic or even democratic socialist politics that are, if we had a Logan's Run rule in American democracy, and I know that would be only people 30 and younger, but if it was just people 40 and younger who were allowed to vote and older people weren't, Bernie Sanders would be swept into office on a landslide in the general election, not only winning the Democratic primary. And I think that's telling, because the generations that came of age largely after the 2007, 2008 market crash, the American dream is just a out of reach fiction for the vast majority of them. And there's no evidence that anything's going to change that equation other than the politics that are presented by Sanders and the Squad and et cetera. I just want to add this one thing. That middle ideology of neoliberalism is represented by the Clintonite Democratic Party, and then the Mitt Romney wing of the Republican Party. It's a crazy situation, because we're in this paradox where if you present what that stands for now, even with the totality of the population, I don't think it would win any arguments. Nobody believes that it can provide a fair deal for the American people. It is a economic and social logic that serves the investor class and almost nobody else. And by the investor class, the 1% that Occupy made so famous. And yet it's what runs the world. It's what has all the power. It completely, and some of the sort of sociological and even social psychological implications of living inside that kind of society and that what's called neoliberalism often around the world. It does really define the way we live our lives. Even people on the left, you see a lot of individualism and careerism that can also create a lot of fragmentation on the left. The kind of bonds of social solidarity that maybe have traditionally informed left movements around the world, and also ancient cultures, are very difficult for Americans to grasp, because we all live inside the logic of neoliberalism, where it's all one against all, right? And everybody for themselves, and also, of course, all the organizations of the essential services in society are organized via the logic of neoliberalism. We don't have, a single payer universal healthcare system, or like they have in the UK, a national health service. We don't have free public universities. You have to buy your way into them. Everything is the logic of the market. So nobody likes it, but we're all stuck inside of it. And maybe a large segment of the population just accepts it as a default reality and is scared as to what might be outside of it, because it's all they've known. So it's unpopular. There's great dissatisfaction with the way the society is organized and structured. And I think the progressive left, the Sanders left, it's drawing off of the templates that were developed around the New Deal period in the United States. Of course, that was still a even more virulently racist society than America today. And of course, the distribution of the benefits of a system like that have to, of course, be distributed equitably among all communities, which was not the case in the 30s and 40s. Let's have no illusions about how great or ungreat the New Deal was, or what it was, and their structural racism was even more deeply entrenched then than it is now. So it obviously needs to be altered significantly in that regard, 100% in that regard. But again, off of that template is, I think, what Sanders is trying to build off of, and also what the Squad is building off of. And it would break the logic of neoliberalism. And that's what PDA stood for before Bernie Sanders. And it stands for after Bernie Sanders. So that's who we are.
That's fantastic. Carlos, did you want to say something?
Yes. Well, case in point, we see the stimulus package that was received today. That's exactly when you see these failed economics, these failed policies that we are receiving from centrists, from the neoliberals. But Alan, you have done so much work starting in the days of Occupy. That's where I actually met you, and the work that was being done, and over the years, after the Occupy movement, we're discussing this with Margaret this morning, is the fact that Occupy did change the conversation, and this is what gave room to the Bernie Sanders movement. And one of the things that we like to do here at this show is point to the direction that progressives need to look at, because we are overwhelmed by the crises that are really affecting all of our lives. But there's a role that we play as progressives, and there are things that progressives are doing that are very, very effective. But not only that, that are also allowing people that are thinkers and people that are dissatisfied with the system to actually take a look at these policies, at these progressive policies. Can you tell us some of the progressive policies that Progressives, Democrats of America is actually pushing for, so that we understand that there are organizations that are working really hard to change things in this world?
Well, we really, I even just got off a incredible 2-hour-long town hall held by San Francisco PDA on reparations. So it's just one example of just sort of so many different elements of American society are imbalanced and out of whack, and they need to be addressed by serious policies to create honest social justice in the society. But we definitely have a set of policies given where Congress, the makeup of Congress, and sadly the fact of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris being president, that we push with a pragmatic sense of possibility. And that's pretty limited because there's not a lot we really want to see happen that's going to get through the current Congress and Biden. Now, some things we then turn and push harder at the state and local level, of course. And I'll give one example of that I'm very happy to start championing around California, which is I'm old enough, and my father was a professor at UC Berkeley. I'm old enough that there were, and my family moved from California when I was a kid. So I graduated high school from the Midwest, and there were kids in my high school who would move out to California to get residence for a year so they could attend it wasn't free anymore, but the very cheap tuition at the incredible public universities in California. And there's something that the Coalition of the University of California Faculty Associations have put forward. They call it the $66 fix. And if every household paid on average at a progressive income tax rate, so if you're a poorer household, you'd pay less, $66 a year, and all public colleges, the community college level, state, the Cal State system, and the UC system, college would be tuition free at just $66 on average per household. And so that's an example of a policy that we support. We support tuition-free public college. Now, I would like it to see tuition-free plus debt-free, because, of course, housing and everything you have to buy to go to college means that even if you don't pay tuition, which is exorbitantly expensive, you could still end up in debt. So we support that. Obviously, the tuition is a barrier to dealing with not just social mobility, but the way that the United States society is both class striated, and our class system, of course, is racist, and it's further striation and all those things. Again, if you just want a just society, if you believe everybody's equal, those things should be rectified, right? Okay, we support Medicare for all, and we supported Medicare for all from the day that we were started up until the present. And so single-payer universal health care. I was working at KPFK. PDA, one reason we push for Medicare for all because we believe in it, but we also are not able to pay our benefits fully to our staff, including myself as executive director. And so I have to buy my health care off of the Cal-covered Obamacare. What a bunch of crap. It's horrendous. It's a joke. I never had the firsthand experience of doing this before. These things are almost useless. You do get, for what you pay, you get, I think, one up to one or, depending which package you get, 1 or 2 visits per year, and then 1 or 2 visits if you get sick. But, you buy that much because you're protecting yourself from, an emergency. Well, they only pay 60, or if you pay a little bit more, 80%. If you're among the half of the population that's wiped out by a $400 unexpected payment, it's not insurance. You'll bankrupt yourself with the 20% or the 40%. What a joke.
Yeah,
And,
that's not to interrupt you, but you're making a really good point. And something that just comes to my mind right now is how much fear the Biden administration, or not the Biden administration, but Biden's campaign put out there in terms of losing or keeping your existing health insurance. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on, how do people become afraid of losing something that is so bad as you're describing right now?
Well, there are 2 groups of people who are upset about the current system going away, or arguably 3. I mean, both certain employers and certain unions might be worried that they won't attract members to their union or workers for their job without the lure of the fact that they're offering healthcare packages. Okay. Because the workers, the general population of wage earners, are desperate to not have to incur the cost themselves, right? And let the managers of the companies handle that for them, because it's also a pain in the ass to deal with yourself, right? But that's not that persuasive a case to the general public. The general public now gets it, and they support Medicare for all. Everybody knows you can't wait till you're 65 because you get Medicare and all this burden. And Medicare is imperfect, and the proposal of Jayapal and Sanders is vastly superior to Medicare for all in terms of co-pays. Bernie's like free at the point of service and all that stuff. It's perfect. Okay, really, really rich people are going to not want this. And they have an unbelievably disproportionate impact on our political system. And they don't want it for 2 reasons, okay? I don't want to go full-on class warfare here, but, please excuse me if I don't pull any punches here.
We encourage it.
The investor class loves health insurance companies. They're actuarial institutions, which means they pretty much, they're numbers crunchers, which are now just algorithms that figure out, they know they're never going to lose money. They're always going to take in more money than they're going to pay out. And that's how they set their levels of payment. So they're very, very good foundation stones for hedge fund investment packages. Okay. So the investor class likes these financialized healthcare institutions. And secondly, if you're really, really rich, if you live in Beverly Hills and you're one of the 1%, it doesn't matter that you pay $22,000 a year for your family's healthcare or $32,000 a year. You can get this gold standard deal. Not only that, you can rest assured that your doctor will see you anytime that you want. So they are worried that they'll have to have, with the unwashed masses, they're going to have to share the healthcare system with them. So rich people don't want it. Other than the rich people, there's no argument at all. And here's the thing. They are saying, as they always have throughout all the class striated systems throughout history, that their lives are worthwhile and our lives are crap and we're dispensable. They don't give a damn for our health. They say that Medicare for all, a study came out, 68,000 people die each year because there isn't universal health care. So they're just like 68. That's more Americans than died in the Vietnam War every year because we don't have universal health care. So they don't give a damn for our lives, and we have to hold them accountable at that level. Now, this actually blew up as we're talking this week. This blew up into a really huge conflagration on the internet around, a force the vote issue that was actually pushed by a guy whose radio show I actually launched on KPFK, Jimmy Dore.
That's right.
And I wasn't happy with the aggression of his words towards Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, or even putting Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on blast about this. I would argue that was misguided. But I do support the force the vote. And there are many votes where this can be parlayed because the majority is so tiny. 5 votes would defeat any bill put forward by Democratic leadership as of right now. 5 votes. And so you can say, I'm not going to support this bill because all the Republicans will vote in the block. I'm not going to support this bill unless we have a floor vote on Medicare for all. And I would like to see that happen, and happen soon, while this pandemic is fresh in everybody's minds. And I would like every damn Democrat who doesn't vote for it to have as big a target on their back as we can draw, okay? Because, you know, they're just rank bastards who don't give a damn for our lives, okay? And why? Because they're serving their wealthy donors, you know, or rather even the direct donations from the health industries and the health insurance companies. And, you know, these are Democrats, they're not Republicans. And we should get them out of the party. And PDA exists to get those kind of new Democrat, corporate Democrats out of the Democratic Party. And as far as I'm concerned, I know it's very tough because of the legacies of and the realities of current racism, including among the white working class. But I would like to see a unified multiracial political party. If we're stuck inside for some arithmetic reason that Margot could explain much better than me, the way that our system works with the first past the poll voting and the large two national parties, we're stuck inside a two-party system. And let's have a party of the multiracial working class. And Silicon Valley and Wall Street should bugger off into the Tory party, which is where they belong, you know. And I mean, there'll be some rich people who have good souls, and you know, I'm not going to ask them not to vote for the good guys, but you know, we really, as long as the Democratic Party is defined by its donor base, that's what we have to break away from. We have to have a party for and by the people, and that's what we hope to build in PDA.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that this idea or this arrival at this conclusion is not unique to you, Alan. A lot of people have come to the same conclusion that we need a real workers' party, a real multiracial across all ethnic groups, whatever boundaries that exist between us, and we need to come together and unite. And I mean, that makes sense because if the working class is divided across the lines, it's so much easier for very rich people to control us, essentially, to control the workers, right? So divide and conquer is that's essentially what happens in this country by dividing across racial lines.
Yeah, and I'm a kid of a professor. I'm from the professional managerial class. I never really accepted I tried to, at least as best as I can, try to you know, wholly align myself with the working class, and you know, I understand that there are going to be some educated people from the middle classes who, hopefully, through the recognition of what's best for the society and the planet, will always support our causes. So, you know, in a two-party system versus the capitalist class, hopefully, we'll have people who will join us who aren't necessarily doing so out of strict economic alliance, that it lines up with where they are on the, you know, class ladder, as it were. But yeah, so, you know, there's a lot of reasons to oppose the political reality of the United States, and the way that it's structured is not just unjust. It's not something that's producing good lives for us here. People work way too hard. They're under way too much stress. And the truth of it is, you really have to go climbing up the economic welfare ladder up into the top 10% to get to Americans who aren't in some degree of precarity. Now, you know, if you're in the top 20%, yeah, you're doing pretty well. It's a rich country. But you know, it is true that if you lose your job and you're, you know, in that kind of range, I mean, there are not that many super rich people. It's a country of 330 million people. So 10% of the population is what, 33 million people. And you get under, I mean, how many people are really well off in the United States? And about 90% of them, 90% are not. We should be able to win this. We also should be able to win this because in terms of age groups, as I mentioned earlier, young people are really gravitating to the politics that we are advocating for, the three of us share. And of course, we're burning ourselves off the damn planet, and we're going to annihilate ourselves as a species unless we stop burning fossil fuels. And I don't think a society organized around the logic of investment is going to move fast enough towards that end.
Yep.
Right.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, Alan, so the thing is, though, you're talking about having a real party, for a multiracial party, you know, the rich people, like they can go to hell if they want to support us, fine, or not, take it or leave it, right?
Right.
But we're still seeing ourselves working within the Democratic Party right now. So do you see a point where we are able to really be able to abandon the existing party? Or do you think that there's always going to be this dynamic where we have to engage through the Democratic Party while also having other multiracial working class parties going on simultaneously, simply because we have such an entrenched two-party system?
Well, I think because we have an entrenched two-party system, the easiest path to political power is taking over one of the two parties. Now, don't get me wrong. The resources as I said earlier, you know, this ideology that's of the center in the United States, and what percent of the population really support, you know, the logic of the Reagan-Clinton unity that occurred between the two parties around, you know, the market should make all the decisions for us. The market is most efficient. Now, the market is if you just leave it up to the market without, you know, regulation, without labor unions, et cetera, they're just going to drive wages down to such an extent. I mean, and that's the old logic of the productive economy. In an investor-based economy, which is what you have, I mean, you don't actually have that many rich people who manage capitalist companies anymore, right? I mean, it's all been consolidated into these very, very large monopolies. And then there are all these attendant small businesses that are basically parts of the supply chain, you know, supply chain structure of these large monopoly companies. You don't have the really rich people dirtying their hands with the day-to-day business of running these companies. I mean, their CEO classes, they serve the people whose their main concern almost is with, yeah, there's the productive aspect of the company, but they're interested in the stock valuation of the company as much as the productive parts of the company. And the rich people in our society, you know, one of the paradoxes is a lot of people might know rich people and they're like, well, they seem nice. Yeah, but, you know, and they don't want to burn ourselves off the planet. You know, they don't seem like evil people, or they're not mostly like dumbass fools like Donald Trump, but they've handed over their money to money managers. And their contract with money managers says that by law, they have to try to maximize their return. That's their arrangement with the people who oversee their investment portfolios. And this is even true of large pension funds, where you try to divest them from certain things. And even when they move over to companies that claim to have like green portfolios, you find out they're not really green portfolios. So, and so what we have is still a system in which the balance of the wealth is being invested, and you need wealth to invest in something to fuel its operation, is being invested in that which is going to render a return on the investment. And that's the prevailing organizational logic of our society. And as long as Wall Street and Silicon Valley, which is, by the way, is very wedded to Wall Street, which after all, Wall Street runs on algorithms, right? All this is now done through, there was a thing in the 2016 election. I don't know if you know this. The largest single funder for Hillary Clinton was the guy who hired the largest single funder for Donald Trump. Okay. And they ran the same investment fund that was called Medallion. Yeah, for real. And the one family's famous. They're called the Mercers. And they funded Trump. Yeah. The Mercers came in to fund Trump after, oh God, you see how quickly you forget these people once he loses an election. But Bannon and Kellyanne Conway were brought in at the time of the Republican convention, at which time the Mercer family became the guys on the white horse who came in and saved the Trump campaign and gave them tons of money. Mercer was hired by a guy named Simon. Simon was the single largest contributor to Hillary Clinton. What did they run? They ran he'll love this, Margot, because I know you can crunch numbers with much better than I can. They ran an investment fund that had about a 70% annual return. A 70%, and they had a secret algorithm.
Oh.
And Mercer and Simon, for what it's worth, these are actually not to the manner born people. They were computer scientists.
Yeah. They go to the universities and they scoop up all of the PhD grads from the top schools, and I've gotten emails from like these groups that are looking for people to work for these money-making companies, and they're like, yeah, we're looking for physicists, mathematicians, engineers, anyone who does computational work, and you can come, and we want women, and we want diversity, and we'll give you a lot of money to come and hang out with us, because if you can crunch numbers, you can make them a lot of money. Yeah.
Well, so those are the two guys. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Carlos.
Go, Carlos.
Yeah,
sorry.
but the things that may surprise us all, at least I'm not surprised, but we have even the unions involved in all these investments in Wall Street. You know what I mean? They have in their portfolios invested into Wall Street, their 401ks, etc. So we are so dependent on this system that they created that is actually against the working class.
Yes.
And I think that now we are starting to see a lot of good candidates that understand this, that are ready to change the system, if you will. And it may take time, but we're starting to see the Ocasios that are coming in with this kind of mentality that understand, educated mentality, that understand economics, the economics that don't work for us. At the same time, hopefully, as many are now pushing for better policies that will affect here at the lowest level. But look, everybody has their hands on the jar. Whether it's the religious groups, we have the Catholic Church, some of the biggest investors on Bank of America, for example. I know they invest a lot they invested a lot on foreclosures, and people may be surprised, but those are the facts. So there is money to be made by a lot of these people, and this is the time when they turn their face the other way. And again, we need politicians. We need to run a lot of candidates that understand economics, of the working class, and hopefully push for those better agendas.
Well, we're definitely in a situation right now, and I don't want to get into because I love AOC. I think she's incredible, and I got to know Rashida Tlaib some, and she's phenomenal, and Ilhan Omar's really great, and Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman. Let's hope Nina Turner wins in Ohio 11 will be great. So really expanding the squad, and they're also people who are just brilliant communicators. They are obviously very adept at communicating over social media too. So they have a large platform, and they're the new leaders of, they're picking up from Bernie, and they're the new generation of leaders. And it's very important to lift them. But I do think this idea of putting the Democratic Party on blast around Medicare for all in the wake of a pandemic is a pretty sound policy. Hopefully the kerfuffle that occurred over the last week that right now is unfortunately louder than the tactic and strategy itself will work itself, will be forgotten, and then we'll have an opportunity to push this very soon, because I do think when it comes to people's health care, and again, you really only have to worry about the half of the population that supports the Democratic Party, in which case support for Medicare for all is in about the 90% realm, right? And and so, to be able to put a target on these bastards who are in the Democratic Party in Congress and are going to vote against it. There's, the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, put out a report last week on the cost of Medicare for all. By the way, Pete Buttigieg, first of all, it is great to have somebody be in the administration in a cabinet position, and they're out of the closet, they're married, they're gay, and that is absolutely brilliant. It's a great thing. But Pete Buttigieg really was just incredibly deceitful. Obviously, he's a super sharp guy. He knows he was just spewing absolute BS about Medicare for all, worse than Biden, because at a certain point, remember, when Buttigieg initially launched his campaign, he supported Medicare for all. But then by the time he starts getting all this funding to be this kind of like corporate lapdog candidate, he's actually up on the platform, just totally dishonest critique of Medicare for all. So the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, these guys are not there to be fans of our side necessarily, but they are honest about the numbers. They just released a report. It saves up to $600 billion a year. I think that's right, or is it $60 billion a year? I don't know. In an astronomical amount of money.
Still a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, 18% of the GDP in the United States spent on healthcare. No other industrialized country in the world is above 10%.
And of course, and And if you get sick, you have cancer, you need treatment, you're likely to go bankrupt in the process of trying to keep yourself alive, too, which is a whole other problem with the healthcare system is the more debt, the debt load that people have to incur.
These incredibly inflated prices, the way the whole system is structured, it's all, of course, when you see these inflated prices, just assume that's money going from middle-class people, working-class people, out of your pockets into the investor class's pockets. And it's absolutely insane. What percentage of the totality of that 18% of GDP is already paid for by the government? It's the majority. And it's very logical. Think about it. Who spends money on healthcare? It's the people who are 65 and older. Okay? It's an incredible scam on people who are in the middle of their lives and are therefore the people who are paying taxes off of their income taxes and through their payroll taxes. You're already paying for the most expensive part of the balance of our money is already coming from that pool of people through their payroll taxes and their income taxes to pay for the health care in the United States of America, largely from their payroll tax, right? And then on top of that, they're fooled into buying private health care. So they've already paid the majority of the budget off themselves, and they don't get any benefit from themselves, and they're asked to pay then for crap health insurance policies. And this is because we have a political class that's in the service of the investor class.
Yep. Carlos, I want to.
Yeah.
No, it's great. It's great. But I wanted to touch a little bit on the climate emergency. But before I do switch gears. Carlos, is there anything else in this particular subject area that you would like to ask Alan a question or make a comment about?
Well, I just want to know what are some of the steps that PDA is taking starting the beginning of the year. We have a new president that's going to be sworn in. Is there anything that we need to look to support and to educate ourselves on, and most important is to participate?
Well, yes. Okay. PDA, first of all, as an organization, and you can learn about us at pdamerica.org. And anybody can email me at Alan, ALAN, at pdamerica.org. We're actually launching a campaign, a unique project where we're going to have liaisons to every congressional office in the country at the local level. So we're going to have at least 2 people be liaisons to every congressional office, every Democratic congressional office. Where we have chapters and there are Republican Congress people, will do that too. But to be frank, there's not really any point in doing your civic duty and trying to convince Republicans to do anything. They're an incredibly unified oppositional political party that is a brick wall, and it's a waste of time, and I'm not into wasting people's time. So we're going to have liaisons to every Democratic congressional office. They will be actual constituents from the district themselves. So I myself, for instance, along with my friend Yolanda, we're going to be the liaisons. You probably know Yolanda, Carlos. Yolanda Noguera. We will be liaisons to Jimmy Gomez's office in CD 34. Okay.
Great.
And so around the country, we're going to develop that project. It's going to go kick off right at the beginning of January, and we will be advocating for bills like Medicare for all. The first thing we'll probably do, though, is focus on the next stimulus package in January. We're also going to have to really, and all of us, everybody listening, we need to be adamant that the vaccines are distributed justly to all communities equally, because everything in this damn country, you have to contend with the well-off being taken care of and white people being taken care of. And that cannot be the way that this is distributed. We also have to be supportive of the distribution of the vaccine around the world. Okay, regardless, any human soul deserves it as much as any other human soul. So obviously those are going to be 2 things right at the top that we'll be dealing with. And right after that, we go to support of, the big ticket items on the progressive agenda, like Medicare for all, Green New Deal. We're going to try to focus on 1 bill per month that we do. This way we'll get a very clear scorecard at the end of the year, and 2 years worth of, asking on, at least 24 bills then. And we'll have a scorecard for each Democratic congressperson. And we'll share this with all of our allies, from the Justice Democrats to Sunrise to Our Revolution to Democratic Socialists of America. We'll even share it with Indivisible. There are a lot of great people in Indivisible, but we're a different kind of organization than Indivisible, which is a blue no matter who organization. Mm-hmm. We're not that. We're for the Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. So that's what PDA's big new project is. And of course, everybody should write me at alan@edamerica.org if you're interested in being a congressional liaison. We have most of the congressional districts in the country covered, but we can always add a third liaison if you're really interested and want to be involved too. And here's something else. We're looking for the liaisons to be reflective of the demographics of the district, okay? And also, and this goes to Margot's next question, 1 out of every 2 liaison will at least agree to take on the climate portfolio. We are PDA very involved in the left wing of the climate movement. So, by the way, on Medicare for All, we're partners with National Nurses United, and we participate in the once a month Medicare for All national roundtable meetings with all the organizations that support Medicare for All. On the climate emergency, we partner with a number of great organizations, obviously Sunrise, but also Friends of the Earth, Food and Water Watch, 350.org, Greenpeace, et cetera. And we're very, very involved through our advisor on climate, Russell Green, was one of Bernie Sanders' lead advisors in 2016. And so we're very involved in the details of climate emergency legislation and also on environmental justice issues. So, yeah, we of course support broadly the Green New Deal. We're for, obviously, the honest development of research and development, and that takes federal spending, because look, Elon Musk is one story, but for the most part, the kind of research that has to be done to lift green energy up to where it can fully replace fossil fuels and nuclear. There still has to be some research and development. I mean, you just think about something like airplanes. They have a huge carbon footprint, and we also got to get this to where, I mean, I don't even understand why there are still internal combustion engine automobiles being produced. I mean, we all know now that electric cars can be really great, and we got to get rid of those. So there's a lot of industrial policy. We support the Green New Deal too, and so we're very involved in climate emergency legislation.
Let me just stop you there just for a moment. I just want to remind everybody that you're watching Stand Up Fight Back, and we have our special guest today, Alan Minsky, who is the executive director of Progressive Democrats of America, and we've been discussing a whole slew of topics. And right now, we're about to get more into detail with everything going on with the climate emergency, as Alan has already begun to touch on. So, Alan, there's so much to discuss around this issue, because obviously we have an administration that's coming in that, on the one hand, perhaps has the most progressive climate platform ever to make it this far in this country, and yet on the other hand, it's absolutely not enough for what we need in order to really tackle this crisis in a meaningful way, so that we can prevent the planet from warming beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. So, I guess from your perspective, what do you think it's going to take in order to really get something like the Green New Deal passed? Obviously, what we have right now for the Green New Deal is really just sort of like a loose resolution, I would say. We don't really have very strong legislative goals in a way. I mean, there are some loose goals, but it's not clear cut. It's not an actual bill that would actually do something, right? The Green New Deal, as I understand it, is just a set of kind of ideas of what we would like to see happen. And each one in and of itself could be a bill, right? So what is it going to take? I mean, honestly, we barely maybe have 10 years to do this, right? Maybe less, because the And I hate to be so dire, but you know, the more we look at the climate models, the more we study the Arctic, we're seeing that this is accelerating, and it's happening in our lifetimes. It's not going to happen. This isn't going to start happening in 2100. This is already happening now. We may have a summer where there's no ice, polar ice, in the next few years, and the consequences of that globally is tremendous. So, what can we do to accelerate this process? I personally don't think what Biden has proposed is enough. But you're really working in a different area from people that we've talked with recently who are more working on the organizing, on the grassroots, and you're talking more about policy side. So what can be done, and how can we have a future, basically?
Well, you know, one of the very difficult things that happens in politics, and now that this is sort of like how I live day to day now in terms of what I do. And I think it is important, you know, when you do find yourself a little bit on the inside, to share your experience with people, both to give people a window into how it operates. You know, and I do think it's an incredibly corrupted political system. There's anybody who's perceiving that from the outside, I am not going to dissuade them. But for instance, right now in California, I'm going to give you a different example. You know, I haven't been that happy with the first few years of Gavin Newsom as governor, but you know, I want to get as much out of him as I can. We're not going to get Medicare for all. I'll get to the climate stuff in a second, but we're not going to get Medicare for all out of the current configuration of Congress and the Biden administration. I wish we would, but we're not. And so one pathway to it is to force this issue in the state of California. And even in Canada, the national healthcare system came out of, what was it, Saskatchewan or Alberta, one of those two provinces, and then it spread across the country. And I know that, you know, the federal government, in being able to generate the sovereign currency and the whole idea that opens up in terms of expenditure, really needs to be the source of covering Medicare for all. But California is so huge and so rich that we could probably generate a single payer universal system here in California. And there's going to be a lot of pressure, and there's going to be a campaign. So we're going to try to achieve that. Okay. So Gavin Newsom isn't the greatest politician in the world, but we got to use this system because he's on paper saying he supports it. Let's force his hand on this. California Democratic Party officially stands for single payer universal health care. Let's try to force their hand on this. Okay, on climate, all of that is really a prelude to, if we're burning ourselves off the planet, we can't really wait for a revolution. We have to act now. And that even means, you know, given the current configuration, you know, if it is going to be private industry that's going to charge up, you know, green energy production, then it's going to be private industry that's going to charge up green energy production. This is, you know, we'll fight for, you know, redistribution of wealth. We'll fight for worker ownership of businesses. We'll fight for socialism at the same time and on other planes. But, you know, if Elon Musk is going to be part of this equation and it's going to get us off of fossil fuels, then we deal with that. So we have to use everything at our resources across the board. We have to try to get as many corporations as possible to buy into real green energy strategies. We have to make it as difficult for the fossil fuel companies as possible, and as difficult for the politicians who are serving the fossil fuel companies as possible. And we have to promote incremental green improvements and broad sweeping proposals, because we have to try to buy as much time as possible. So if it's just no fracking on public lands, no fracking on public lands, not a universal ban. We're for a universal ban. We're for no fossil fuels, you know, no coal power plants. Well, let's limit as much as we possibly can, keep as much fossil fuel in the ground as we possibly can. We need the perfect, you know, when the perfect is the enemy of the good. We got to get to the perfect on this, but we also have to limit the amount that's being done. And we have to use the federal government in the United States to supercharge investment in research and development in green energy. So the Green New Deal has been, you're right, a resolution. It is my understanding that the various allies of the squad, Bernie Sanders in the Senate, squad members, and again, the few people close to them like Ro Khanna and other Congress people, are going to break up the component parts and release detailed bills in this Congress. So they're going to generate a really awesome blueprint. Now, it's very unlikely, given the way the Congress is configured, that they're going to get that many co-sponsors. It's going to go too far with, the leadership propelling it to a floor vote, let alone any chance of getting it past the Senate, even if the Democrats win in Georgia. But you're going to see a very, very fully envisioned Green New Deal be introduced. So you're going to have the, federal job guarantee program is going to come out of one office. Building up green energy is going to come out of another office. You're going to have environmental justice bills come out of another office. So the whole thing is going to be completely filled out. There's a question of a just transition. How do you get workers who are going to lose their jobs because they're working in oil, gas, or oil and gas related industries to not become an entrenched political opposition to the Green New Deal? Because we need everybody to get on board. So we got to incrementally try to improve what we can in every front in the current Congress on this issue. And then we also have to simultaneously elevate and celebrate these proposals that I think are going to be really exceptional. They're going to come out of a set of offices from the U.S. Congress.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is why it's extremely important for us to work together. To strengthen our allies' relationships, because more than ever, we are going to, moving forward in 2021, starting in 2021, we need to be out there pressuring, educating ourselves, fighting hard, pushing for those people that are introducing these bills, making sure that they also have the support that is needed to be able to cross the lines if we can get there. But there are some realities that we're going to have to face. And those realities, include the fact that we are a minority. We don't have great power in Congress. We have a few people, a few members that have been added to the squad, but it's building. And that's what we need to celebrate. The fact that we're building and we need still moving forward. And 2022 will be perhaps another time when we may see changes. So we got to keep a very close look at the work that our representatives will be doing in the next 2 years and whether we need to vote them out or not.
Yes.
So I think it is very welcoming, the project that you guys are taking on by being able to have representatives, liaisons to these congressional districts and keeping an eye on them, keeping a scoreboard, because we are going to have to come back in 2022. And if they failed us, this is the time for us to be able to run our own candidates.
Yeah, it's, and thank you, Carlos. That's perfectly stated. It's absolutely the vision of what we're trying to pursue. And, also elevate independent media, and we also have to be realistic about how powerful old media is and how many people it reaches. And also, I think it's important too, and this goes a little bit towards what we saw going on over the past week over the fight about force the vote. PDA, we are going to even approach the offices with a sense of almost like classical civility. But we are going to announce to the public what the results are of where they're voting, and they're going to figure that out in time. But we have to try to persuade everybody that we can as warmly and as welcomingly as possible, no matter who they are. And we also have to elevate democracy, have faith in human intelligence, and go forward like that, and try to build a exemplary left in the country that can transform the society. And also, our goal is a fully inclusive, prosperous middle-class society with zero poverty and zero carbon emissions. That's what we want. We want a prosperous society, and we think people will find that an attractive vision.
Yep, Alan, I just wanted to go back really quick to something you were talking about. We have to, like you said, we don't have time to wait for a whole revolution. And it sounds like there are some things that you're saying that we may have to compromise or accept the direction that goes within the system that we have. But what concerns me right now is that the compromise that I'm hearing is net zero carbon emissions. If you look at the climate models, actually what we need is negative carbon emissions. We actually need took at geoengineering, unfortunately, and hopefully by a different term than that, because it has that in it of itself evokes a sense of just technology and only including those who are, the technologists or within a small circle. But actually, geoengineering is something that can be accessible on a societal level, because it's something that society has to have an interest in order for it to work, right? So, but we're not really hearing enough about the actual concrete steps that we need. And this compromise of net zero, I am very concerned that it's not going to be the thing that's going to buy us time. It's just going to be a Band-Aid, or it's just going to be something to calm people down while we still have carbon emissions, carbon still being emitted into the atmosphere. And I'm very concerned about methane emissions, because as the permafrost starts to melt, that is going to increase the warming. So I hear what you're saying, but I really want to know what, we need more, I guess.
Well, no, I completely agree. My point about having to get as much kept in the ground as possible and incremental improvements is only because of the current configuration of Congress and the Biden administration. And of course, we have to press on it. Your points are absolutely correct. There are a few things too. There's geoengineering and the idea of carbon sequestration, getting carbon out of the air. I don't think that technology works yet, is my understanding.
No, it does.
So
yeah,
it's even. Yeah. So if people out there think that Margot's talking about something that already exists, so this goes a little bit towards research and development. Though research and development is, I'm thinking more about green energy systems, because the only things that I see that work as sequestration are reforestation, right? And also possibly at the ending of factory farming, so that you have responsible animal husbandry, which would probably, of course, Donald Trump, right? What did he say? They're going to steal your hamburgers. Well, maybe people would eat fewer hamburgers. Actual, responsible animal husbandry that's sort of in harmony with the parts of the world where cattle would naturally be, which probably, by the way, wouldn't be Central or California or deserty type climates, right? It would be places where there's grass to graze on and things like that. Could actually be a contributing positive factor. But the amount of methane that is released through factory farming is a huge contributor to global warming. But the methane that Margot was citing was the thawing of the permafrost up above the Arctic Circle and the release of methane that could go from there. And that would be much worse than anything that we've ever seen from the burning of rainforests, anything. I mean, people know very little about how catastrophic the last decade or 20 years have been. I think the largest single increase of carbon into the atmosphere came from the destruction of the Indonesian rainforests due to the development of monocultures to grow palm oil for, basically consumer products that are on the model of multinational American food consumer products. They all have palm oil in them. So they took one of the largest rainforests in the world, the Indonesian rainforest, and they just plowed them and they burnt them. And when they burned them, they burned all the moss underneath the canopy of the rainforest, and the release of carbon into the atmosphere was hotter than I think anything that's happened. All of this after we knew that global warming was a reality. Okay? And all of which the United States government did nothing to intervene in. Just kills the habitat of orangutans, which is obviously pulls at the heartstrings, and it's unbelievably terrible because they're an unbelievably beautiful animal species, as all animal species are. But obviously they particularly touch us because they're so close in intelligence to us. Yeah. But that happened. And now it's what is it called? What's the word for them? The Borean forests in Russia and Canada. That if what's underneath them burns, we're toast. And in fact, the tar sands in Alberta, that is such a industrially intense way to produce oil that, you know, James Hansen a while ago said that if the tar sands are fully developed, it's game over for humanity. And we're developing the tar sands right now. A brave group of frontline communities in Minnesota are trying to block the largest tar sands pipeline in the world that just got greenlit, get this, by a Democratic governor in Minnesota.
Yep.
And not only is it just absolutely just, you know, again, just continuing the genocide against the indigenous people of this continent, it is, you know, it's allowing for the development of this catastrophic project up in Canada. I mean, you know, and all the liberals in the country throughout the whole Trump era held up Justin Trudeau as a paragon of being a great politician. Well, he's a guy who completely greenlit and turned the momentum on the tar sands. And I don't think that anybody can dispute what Hansen said about the tar sands. You know, back about 20 years ago, there was this notion that we were going to hit peak oil. And that, you know, all of Western technological society, because global warming consciousness wasn't that high in the late 90s yet, which should have been, but it wasn't. And that we would lose the level of, you know, technological society we had if we didn't have carbon to burn. And then the tar sands were developed. And they're like, oh, well, don't worry about that. The tar sands will be able to continue when they don't have, you know, Venezuelan and Saudi crude will be tapped out. So that's what the tar sands are. And they're developing them up in Canada, you know, our close, benign, liberal ally to the north. No, they're, you know, destroying humanity. So, you know, we got a lot of consciousness to raise. And you're absolutely right, Margot. The results have to start yesterday, and they're not even starting yet. And again, this is going on right now. The Line 3 Enbridge pipeline got greenlit by the governor of Minnesota about, they finally got their final Army Corps of Engineer things passed. They rushed it all so that it would get rubber stamped by the Trump administration. It's possible the Biden administration will stop it, but it's going on right now. And almost, you know, most of the population doesn't know anything about it. And it's very difficult because they're doing it in winter in Minnesota. So it's very difficult to mobilize people like they did to get people up to Standing Rock. You know, it's cold as hell in northern Minnesota right now. And COVID is happening. That's how cynical it is. And the workers who are coming in to build it are bringing COVID into the communities. I mean, it's like Thanatos times Thanatos. And that's what we have to like fight against. And I'll tell you this that I'm worried about too. I know I was hopeful just 10 minutes ago, but Margot's absolutely right. No, you're absolutely right. And here's the thing. The Obama era recovery from the market crash of 07 and 08 was fueled by a foundation of the lifting of the economy in the domestic United States was the development of fracking. So oil and gas, domestic productivity lifted us out of that recession. It took a long time, but it was a key cornerstone especially for the investor class of lifting us out of the recession. And we became, for the first time in my lifetime, really a fossil fuel exporter. I'm very skeptical that Biden will really reject that logic now, because he's going to want to see his little market Dow index and S&P index soar, or he'll worry that they'll lose, and they'll say, just shut up until the 2022 midterms. And then they'll say, just shut up until 2024. Margot's right. We can't shut up.
Yes, that's why I think that we have to also not just try to push on the policy side, but we do need, maybe we won't have a revolution, but we do need people to get out on streets. We do need people to occupy and not give up, because they're not going to really listen. And when I say they, I mean our political leadership. They're not really going to listen to us if we ask them nicely, because we don't have any money.
Oh, no, you're
and
right.
We don't have any money. Politicians on Capitol Hill, they say like, well, I hear what you're saying about the polar bears, but I haven't heard somebody from this corporation ABC coming in and complaining. So I don't think this is important.
And the polar bears haven't donated recently.
Yeah, exactly. Polar bears just haven't given that a paycheck. the paycheck in the mail for them to care. So, we live in a kind of corporate feudalism these days, and I'm borrowing that from Yanis Varoufakis, but I think he's right. Like our government is pretty much tied to these corporate powers, these corporations, and I think we have to, of course, we have to do the policy. Of course, we have to do the grants, but we also have to really just get out there and yell and scream and bang on doors and really do everything we possibly can. And also not just let children do it, because I love Greta. She is my hero. She's amazing. But we can't just say, the children will save us. The 17-year-olds are not going to save us. We also, adults, millennials, Gen X, boomers, etc., we have to also come to the table and be there and show up, because it's also exhausting for these kids to be doing this. I see what they're tweeting, and they're like, I was just in the emergency room. I had heart palpitations. I'm 15 years old. Why? Because I'm stressing out over the climate and I'm trying to organize people. That's unacceptable. We are failing them if we are allowing them to feel this way. I mean, it's, we're all losing our futures. So obviously this is like I feel really passionate about this, but this is my my thing these days, but in my research and stuff. So I'm just
two things. I know we're running over, but
yeah,
two
we have
things.
to stop. Yeah.
We do, but okay, you're absolutely right. It has to be an inside-outside strategy, and the outside has to be demonstrations and pressure on these guys who aren't moving. So, of course, movements are totally central, and they have to be as loud and as disruptive as possible. And of course, the elevation of the whole concept of the Green New Deal came from AOC bringing the Sunrise Movement to Pelosi's doorstep before she was even sworn in back in January or December, I think, of I suppose it was December 2018. But here's the thing, too. What's crazy is that the United States of America, and I'm not a nationalist, I'm an internationalist, but sometimes, again, along what I was saying about where we have to form our alliances, and on this particular subject, use our sins. The United States of America, and you know this, Margot, from firsthand experience, has the balance of the world's university scientific research capacity is within the domestic United States of America. In fact, if one wants to look at it institutionally, only country in the history of the 20th century who came close to developing a scientific university research capacity that challenged the United States was the Soviet Union. That's one of the most devastating stories of recent history, is that's been completely disbanded and destroyed. So if you're an elite research scientist anywhere in the world, you try to get on faculty in an American university. And there are about 100 universities in the United States that have scientific research capital infrastructure. I mean, like the University of Nebraska has as much as Oxford does practically. Like these incredibly large state universities all have incredible university research capacity. And the military industrial complex has been running research through them for decades now. That has to become green energy research development. And if it is done, yes, of course, let's hopefully have some kind of equitable economic system where the wealth of that is spread around. But if it saves the damn planet and it's done through a venture capital model, then it's done through a venture capital model because we haven't won enough political power to have it not be done that way. If it's done at the universities in the United States and it's developed and it becomes the energy systems for the world, how can they not see that this is the biggest wealth generation project on the table in the world right now? And yet they don't fund it because they're locked into their narrow-minded funding structures. They should take the money away from the military and fund it into green energy research. All that wealth that's generated by, in Saudi Arabia because they have access to fossil fuels over the last 5 decades, which is such a large pool of money, it makes, melt your mind to even consider, right? All of that will come from who wins the war to reach the development of green energy capacity. The United States has the assets to lead the world in it, but they don't even go there because they're locked into very narrow-minded thinking. And, I don't know why they don't go there, but they should. And, it's difficult. I mean, green energy systems are not at the point where they can completely run a complete modern industrial society at the level of fossil fuels. And you know this, Margot, too. On the what's it called, the table of chemicals that we all learn, hydrogen, helium, what's that called, the periodic table. The element that burns, the element that burns the hottest is carbon, and that's what we use to fuel our energy systems through fossil fuels. So we need to have a green energy system and storage systems that are strong enough to fuel factories, to fuel all of our electrical grid, and to have all the components of modern technological society. But the best situated institution in the world to achieve that is the federal government of the United States through funding of universities. And that's what we have to push for too.
Yes, absolutely. Well, there's so much that we could talk about on the subject, Alan, but we are out of time and we don't want to keep you any longer, but we'll have to have you on again. This was great.
You guys are the greatest. So I'm just honored to be with both of you. You guys are phenomenal thinkers and activists, and all you do is incredible.
No, I'm so honored, Alan, and Carlos and you are just some of my heroes from Occupy. And you know, Alan, when I see you, I think of this, the first time I met you, I had done a couple of reports out of Occupy, like the first couple of days, and you were there, and you said, "Oh, I watched your stuff." I was really surprised. And then the first thing you did was you gave me advice on how to improve it, and I never forgot that, and it meant a lot to me because it meant you were paying attention. So it's just.
I thought you were good, or I probably wouldn't have bothered. You know, so.
So it's just my heart races basically. So glad that we're here together.
To say thank you to both of you, and everybody check out pdamerica.org. And if anybody wants to contact me, especially about the Congressional Liaison Program, Alan, ALAN, at pdamerica.org.
Right. Thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us. We appreciate you. And again, you're an inspiration to us. And a good brother and a great leader for the progressive movement. We're honored to have you.
Oh, thank you, Carlos. A ton from both of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning in tonight and watching. You've been watching Stand Up, Fight Back. I'm Margot Paez. And just below me on the screen is Carlos Marroquin. We're your hosts. We air every weekend on Sundays at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern. And we're just putting in the 6 o'clock hour in the mix, seeing how it goes. So we'll let you know we have another one in the evening. Again, we're here with our special guest, Alan Minsky. So look forward to seeing you again next weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, and wear a mask.